Hello again. In our last short video, we grabbed our Gingerbread Man model from Maya and exported him as an FBX, and then brought him here into Unity, where we took out his animations and made them all individual separate clips, and now we're back to actually do something useful with him. So, without further ado, let me just go ahead and grab that guy and we'll get to work. So I've got him down here in my models. I've already created one of these and set it all up just as a practice run. So like any good cooking show, we've got a completed model that we can refer to if we need to. But here's the raw materials. Here's our gingerbread man. This is just the raw object. Before I go any further, I don't want to make any changes to the raw object, so I'm going to go ahead and make another prefab. And this is my Gingy 2.0 here that I had already played with. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a new prefab. We're going to call him Proto Gingy. And I'll just grab this guy and drag him down into that new prefab. All right, and let me delete that. Drag the prefab out, and now any changes we were making to this are just going to be to this specific prefab. We're not going to be altering the base model, and we're not going to lose anything, we hope. So here he is. He's just a guy. He's standing around. If we tap on him and hit the inspector here, we can see that he still needs an animation controller, and we haven't done much else with him, right? And so I'm just looking at some stuff. So first thing we want to do with Proto Gingy here, let me go to my scene here. So I've got this main camera turned on, and right now, let me first drag our new Proto Gingy forward. And he can just stand here in front of the castle where we know he's going to be in view. So save that and hit play. And he's just standing there. And we've got tacos falling from the sky because it's raining tacos. There's not much else going on. He just stands there. So here's what I want to do first. I'm going to take this main camera and I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to go, just collapse that. Got my Proto Gingy here. I'm going to create a new camera. And I'm going to drag it up into that prefab instance. And we're going to call this the player Gingy Cam. Now, there's a lot more we should be doing and could be doing in Unity with cameras, but in this case, I've just got this camera that I want to attach to my character, and it's just going to float behind him, and it's really actually going to be kind of terrible, but it'll accomplish what we want for the purposes of a short kind of an introductory video to this. So I've got my camera preview here, and I've attached it. I've got it right behind him. I'm just going to pan it down a little bit so I can see all of the Gingerbread Man, or Proto Gingy here in my view. And I don't have to tag this, but I'm going to for future purposes. I'm just going to make this a player camera. And there's Proto Gingy, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit apply right now, and that should have updated my prefab here. And yes, sure enough, there's a player Gingy camera now attached. So anytime I drag out that guy, it's in there. So we've done something cool. Let me go ahead and hit play really quick. There's our camera. It's right behind him. So we didn't do anything else cool. So I'm going to grab the whole instance, the whole prefab right out here on the outside, drag it back. I'm just doing some iterative checks here. So I've got him back here, drag him over there, hit play, and our camera stayed behind him. Now look, that little rolling space helmet went right through him, so that's going to clue me into the next thing I want to do. Turn this off. And right there on the outside, I'm going to add a rigid body component. leave that pretty well standard. I'm going to go ahead and just take a peek. I'll pull him up a tick. And rigid body is fine, but we also need a collision. So, but since I'm doing this on the outside of this and not on the mesh itself, I'm just going to go ahead and add a box collider. Cool stuff. And I've got this representation of my box. I'm going to go ahead and edit it. And then it gets almost this Blender-esque kind of a movement when we do that. So I can, with that edit collider thing ticked, I can start dragging him around and defining the outline for this. So I can do it like that and just kind of eyeball it, or I can say, look, I know I want this to be 5.5 high and then centered on the guy, so like 2.75 up. I can do these cool type-ins. I don't know if I need that offset any. So it looks like it pretty well covers him. The tips of his fingers are going to be outside the box, but not a big deal. And we're a little far forward. So let me just pull that back a tick. Negative 0.15. Okay, so just to make sure that our physics worked, I'm going to grab him, pull him way up, and then hit play. So we've got a box collider, we've got rigid body. Oh no. So the good news is gravity hit us, and then so did that. Right, so we hit that and fell over. Now we've got a camera attached to the back of a character. That is not good. To just kind of fall over and go all roly-poly or turtle, right, and not be able to move. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my rigid body, and I'm going to freeze the rotations on him. And now I'll still be able to turn him later on via a script. But for the purposes of the rigid body physics on him, he shouldn't be able to fall over. So let's see if that did what we wanted it to. There we go. So we just kind of slid off the top of that, and we didn't fall over. So that's good. We've got physics. We've got a camera attached to our guy. But what about the really cool stuff? What about the animations? All right. So I've already got a folder here for animation controllers for that advanced one that I did. So I'm just going to go ahead and right-click in there, and I'm going to create a new animator controller. And I'm going to call this Gingy Animator Controller. I can be very verbose with my naming, and here it is, right? So I've got this animator controller. There's not a lot going on here. This is an animator controller as is, and so we've got basically nothing. So let me go back, and I'm going to grab my model, Mr. Gingy here, right? And if I go back to my base model, not the prefab, I can see all of these animations that we created. I did take off the take 001 or whatever it was that had the full animations because we don't need to play all the full animations. So I've got each of these 1 second-ish animations, and I can drag, let me just open this up actually. I can drag out an animation onto this animator, and it immediately gets hooked up. So the first one I drag out, let me just undo that. The first one I drag out will kind of be our default. Of course, I want idle to be my default. So if I drag out the wrong one first, then I can do some other things to fix that. So I'm going to move this any state over. You can just kind of click and drag. I've got this whole graphing window here. So really I've got this idle state, I've got a jump state, I've got a walk state. I'm just going to kind of position these a little bit. I'm going to right click on idle, and I'm going to say I want this to be my default state. So with that done, I'm going to save that. I've got the start of my animation controller. I'm going to go back to my scene. I'm going to grab Proto Gingy here, and it's looking for a controller. So let's give it one. So there's the Gingy Animator Controller. Now, just having done that, I'm going to go ahead and hit play again and do some more iterative testing. I've got the controller on, and the controller already said, hey, this idle animation is my default, so it just starts playing. And so we've got this guy just kind of hanging out, swaying back and forth. That's fun. But we want to do more with him. And so the animation controller was fun. Let me just do a couple more things there before we go any further. I'm going to grab my jump animation. I'm going to right click on this, and I want to set a transition. Right, and so I click on make a transition, and I can drag to or from things. And it goes either back to idle or back to walk. So kind of what I've just done there is I've said, look, after one jump, transition back to these. And we can look at those. We go back to my inspector. So I've got jump, and I've got these transitions that I just set up. And we can preview those here in this bottom window, right? And so going back from jump to, say, idle, let me see what that looks like. He jumps up and down, and then immediately starts to sway. Right, same thing for jump and walk. So I've got that transition set up so it knows after one jump to go back into that other animation. And he's walking. All right, we'll use those later. So save that again. Always a big fan of the Command S for saving. We've got Gingy. He does cool things, but not enough. So let me do this. I'm going to go into my scripts folder, and we need a way to control this guy. So I've already created a scripts folder. I've already created a script for another character. Let me just go ahead and create a brand new C# script. And we're going to call him Gingy Player. We can call it behavior. I'm just going to call it player, Gingy Player. And let's open that up. So I've got MonoDevelop here. You may have Visual Studio or whatever. MonoDevelop kind of comes by default with Unity on a Mac and is plenty good enough. So before I go any further, let me zoom in so we can see all this stuff on this tiny YouTube screen. Funny enough, it shows me a key code, but I can't get it to work, right? Doesn't work. So first thing we want to do is I'm going to do some setup here. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to set up a public, which means it'll be accessible back in Unity in our inspector window. I'm going to make it an int, and I'm going to call it run speed. And I can either just set it like that, or I can give it a default. And I think I'm going to give it a default of 50, and we'll see what happens. I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to do a rotation speed. Set that at 100 by default, and if those numbers don't end up working out for me, I don't have to come back to the script. I can just set those up per prefab while I'm in Unity. And then finally, I'm going to need a tie back to my animator controller. So my animator, and I'm just going to call him anim and shorten him down, and there's that. And the only thing for setup is I'm going to have to refer back to my animator controller. And so here's my instance of it, anim, and I need to tell it, look within yourself, Luke. Look within, get your component, find your animator. Set them up, and that is what I mean by anim. So we've done all that, and that's cool, but we need to do more. So let's start actually working on input. So this is cool. So this is what Unity gives us kind of out of the box, right? So I'm going to set up a variable. I'm going to call it walking Z because we're walking along the Z axis, and I can now query my inputs, and we can probably spend a whole class on scripts and all that kind of fun stuff, but this is just a quick way to get us started. So if you don't understand everything, don't worry about it. If you do, great. Let's talk. All right, so just going to finish typing this out, and then we'll talk about what this means. All right, so here's the cool stuff. So within Unity, right, I can just query input, and Unity has already mapped a lot of things to get access, right? So it can be the up and down arrows and left and right arrows, WASD. I believe this will even go out and get the access input from a controller or something that you've got hooked up. So this is just a really quick, simple way that Unity has given us to query movement controls, right? We've standardized movement controls, and now we can just go get them real quick. So what I've done is I said, hey, go get the input, and if there's vertical input, right, and that's going to be the up or down arrows, it's going to be W or S, then get that input, and then we're doing a few things. We're taking it times the time delta time. And what delta time is basically a way to smooth out our stuff. So update here gets called once per frame, as we know. But as we also know, once per frame doesn't always mean consistency, right? So if we've got a stuttering frame rate or a fast frame rate, then that frame rate could affect how our animations and controls get played out. So what I've done is I've reached out to time here, and basically time dot delta time translates whatever our current frame rate is into actual seconds. And so this smooths out our animations, it smooths out our inputs, and basically it makes up for any jumps in our frame rate of the game. So I've taken that, I've got the input, I'm smoothing it out with the time dot delta time, and then I'm multiplying it times my run speed, which I have guesstimated to be about 50. And so with that in place, we're actually already ready to start walking. So I'm going to do one more of these, and I'm going to do a rotation along the X, and it's going to be almost the same code if I can hit the right buttons. Input get axis, and in this case I want the horizontal. Which is the left and right arrows, or the A and D keys. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take that times time dot delta time, and then take that also times my rotation speed. And then I misspelled that. Rotation. All right, too many. Rotation X. So I've got these variables, and I can now do something with them. So let me just go ahead and start leaving a couple of comments. So I've got this new thing called Walking Z, and I'm going to affect my transform along the translate. And I'm going to say, do nothing on 0, do nothing on Y, but take that input and translate us along the Walking Z. Likewise, I'm going to take the transform input, and I'm going to rotate again along a vector 3, and this time it's 0, and then we're going to rotate on the X, that's Y. I'm rotating along the Y. I named that incorrectly. That's fine. I can just fix it. Check that out. All right, so I'm rotating along the y-axis, walking along the z-axis, and with this script, we should be able to go back to Unity, apply it to Proto Gingy here, and actually start moving using my up, down, and left and right arrows. So I've got an animator. All he does right now is make us idle. I'm going to add a component. What did we call that? We called it Gingy Player, right? So there it is. Type that in. And as you can see, those things that I made public, run speed and rotation speed, are already here, and I can alter those. And where the script says 50, I can say, you know what, I want this guy to be super fast, make him 100, and that's a way to use reusable scripts and change them across different prefabs and instances. All right, so we've got this guy. He falls in, he rotates. I mean, not rotates, he idle animates, but check this out. Yes, now he also rotates. There's no animation involved with the rotation, and he moves forward and backwards and kind of falls down a little bit. But he looks like maybe just some kind of a specter, some kind of a ghost, because he just moves, right? He just sways the whole time. So we've got everything else set up. What we really, really, really care about is those animations that we spent all that time in Maya working on, right? Right. Okay, let's make that happen. So I'm going to go back out to MonoDevelop. And the first thing I'm going to do is just try and get my space bar to make the jump happen. Autocomplete doesn't always complete the way we want it to. All right, so there's a fun little way of saying, hey, once per frame, right? I'm checking to say, hey, did this space bar get entered as an input? If it did, let's do something cool. So I'm going to say anim, which is our animator, right, that we referred to up here. I'm going to say if that happens, then play this animation. Now, this is going to look a little silly, but we'll explain it. So I'm reaching out to my animator, I'm telling it play this animation, and then it actually looks a little weird here because I've got to take a string, which in this case is jump, it's what we called the animation, and I'm hashing that out into an index, right? So each of the animators, each of the animations in here has actually got, it's not showing, Gingy animator, got one layer. See, we can't even see it. Anyway, what's happening is this animator actually refers to each of these probably in the order they were drug in. So this is probably 0 because we drag jump in first and then idle and then walk. And the animator itself really doesn't know what these things mean, right? So I called this a walk, and I called this a jump, and I called this idle, but it doesn't have any idea what that means. So that's what's happening back in MonoDevelop is we are calling the string to hash and saying, look, find me the index for whatever is called jump, and then play that, right? So it's just a translation here. And I've over-explained, but let me save that. And we'll hit play on our scene. And he does his thing. He still doesn't walk, but if I hit space, he plays this jump animation. Super cool. It looks really slow. So let me fix that. I can go back into my animator. I'm going to grab that jump animation, and I think I want to take that like ×3. Like this should be a whole lot faster jump. It's kind of fun to have him. Oh wow, that's a really fast jump. Let me take that down to 2. Yeah, that's not too bad. It's still a little slow, but we're going to go with it. All right, so we figured all that out. We've got our controls. The controls all work. Let's just make sure that our controls will play the walk animation as well. And then I think we're set. So I'm actually going to pull this jump thing out and up. Right, so I don't want to interrupt the jump animation. So if we're jumping, then, and we've hit the space bar and we're jumping, I don't really care what else is going on. So that's kind of my big important thing. So if jump got hit, just do that. Otherwise, do this stuff. So if they're not jumping, then we're going to go ahead and check for these different movements. And let me do this. I can just wrap that whole thing. If walking Z is not equal to 0, meaning we actually got some input, then we'll make it move. And that way we're not constantly calling, hey, rotate along nothing if nothing was input, which is actually happening there. And in addition to moving, we will go ahead and do this. Why do that? We can just copy it. So copy, paste this down here and saying if you're walking, then tell our animator to run the walk animation. And just for the sake of code cleanliness, really isn't necessary for this. We do the same thing for rotation Y. We don't have a rotation animation, but if we did, this would be how we would call it. And we've got it wrapped up like this. It also means that we're not going to try to rotate on every frame, even if we don't have input for that. So, code looks good, I think. If we're jumping, then play the jump. Otherwise, we check for walking and rotation, and that's the only time we play the walk animation. Let's see what happens here. I've saved it again. He falls off. He walks really slow. And we never told him to stop walking. But check this out. If I jump, then he goes back into idle. Because, because we told it to transition at the end of a jump to idle. We didn't tell it to transition at the end of a walk to idle. So we'll go back to our Animator Controller here. First thing I want to do is make that walk a lot faster, because that's just like this really slow motion thing. And I want to transition from walk back to idle. And we'll leave that transition by default kind of as is. All right, I hit a pile of tacos and the physics engine sent me flying. But I can walk, and then I eventually transition back to idle animation. Can run around. Oh my goodness, I'm too giant to be playing basketball. I can jump, go back to that. I think we've got everything we need. All right, we're calling our animations on startup. Uh-oh, we need to get some collision in here in Rockland. And in some of these houses. And I fell through the earth. Well, that's unfortunate. Go ahead and start over. Also, now that I've got physics going, I should just be able to start kicking things around. At least a little bit. Let's do one last thing. I'm getting way too affected by hitting tacos and balls and getting thrown around. So I'm going to make my mass a little bit heavier than everybody else's. We've already fixed our constraints. We may need to up our run and rotation speed to account for our mass having increased. And we can kind of sort of kick some things around. And then we get massively affected again by hitting things. Kicking another prone gingerbread man statue should not have sent me flying into the sky. But that's for another time. That's physics. We can definitely play with that for days. We've got our, let me just double check our guy. We've got our box collider in place. Where's that collider at? Oh, I'm on the game, not the scene. That's why. Wrong tab. I've got the box collider in place. I'm going to fall not quite as far. Well, we're playing the right animations, and that's what we're here for. So, as I said, you can really get lost and have a lot of fun when you really start moving your guys around and playing with physics. There's a lot we can do in terms of this right here, right? I've got my camera clipping in and out of the boxes and things. So animation is good. We could tweak on this level for days, and I encourage you to. So I will upload this for the class for those people who have access to this. Go ahead and push all that to our Unity Collaborate space. And your next step will be to take your characters in from Maya, just as we did in the first video, bring it in as an FBX, separate out your animations, create your, let me do this really quick, apply all that back to my prefab. So create your animations, create your animation controller, put a camera and a script on your guy, and start walking him around. And now that I've done all of that, I'm going to put this guy into my cameras and players folder. And so we can turn them on and off at will. Say we don't want to use Proto Gingy, we're going to use Gingy 2.0 with more physics. Then we bring that guy in, and he falls even further. So get your characters, get your animations, get your scripts, get all the other things in place, and then drag your character prefab with camera into this cameras and players folder. And for now, our player selection screen will be literally this. So we'll say, turn them on, turn them off, Proto Gingy's active, and we'll go. So have fun. Enjoy all of that, and we'll be talking soon.